Thank you so much, all of you, for joining, for the colleagues in the audience as well, and for this distinguished panel. For me, it's a pleasure to be amongst, as Cristiano said, a family, a community of colleagues so passionate about legislative modernization. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that's very close to my heart, and I know to many of you as well, on how can we use artificial intelligence and integrating this to the procedures of constituent relations from the parliamentary offices. As colleagues in the audience saw, we have the pleasure of welcoming Cristiano Ferri. He works in the party leadership in the Chamber of Deputies in Brazil as an innovation expert. We have Jonathan Ruckert, the CEO of NovaWorks Australia. Lumina Mentari, she is a open parliament expert from the House of Representatives of Indonesia. And Steve Dwyer, he's the Senior Innovation Director from the US House of Representatives. Before we start our panel, I'd like to invite each one of you to very briefly introduce yourself, your relation to this topic. Maybe we can do this alphabetically. Cristiano, would you like to introduce yourself to the colleagues?
Sure. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure being here again. I'm really supportive to what Luís does with Bússola Tech, bringing together a lot of good people to talk about nice innovation projects in parliaments all over the world. So it's an honor being here again. I'm a mix of public manager, innovation public manager, very focused in parliament, but in public area in general. I've been working with this in about 15 years and 31 years working in the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, where I'm based in the moment. And within the chamber, the house, I've been working in the committees, in the plenary sessions, in all over the places here. I'm becoming too old, too much time of work in parliament. And also I have another field of work. I do research and a professor in a master program we have here focused on legislature in our Center for Formation Training, a specific kind of school we have here focused based on the house, the Brazilian house. That's me.
Thank you so much, Cristiano, for your introduction. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, hi. So my name's Jonathan from NovaWorks. We work with parliaments all around the world to really help with strategy. And now we're finding a lot more really conversations happening around artificial intelligence. So my focus is really about explaining AI, explaining the how to do it in a safe manner. Is really one of my major topics, which I like to cover off as well. Understanding like the governance, understanding the risks associated with it, and also how to use it effectively as well within the organization is really, what I hope to bring to the table tonight.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Lumina, would you like to introduce yourself to us as well?
Yes, thank you, everyone. My name is Lumina. So I'm currently serving as the staff for the Open Parliament Initiative in Indonesia. So basically, I work with a lot of units, including the public services, the ICT department, and ensuring that the information in the parliament are open, transparent, and public participation, or the quality of public participation is increasing. And we also deal with emerging technologies, such as AI. And I've just entered the parliament from the government in 2020. So there's a lot of changes since COVID and now the AI boom. So I think that a lot of parliaments and government organizations are dealing with that many shifts and changes, and which is very difficult for them to navigate this transition. And my job is to help them inform and mainstream some of those innovation in their institution. But thank you again, Luís and Bússola. We have been great communities, and I've seen you guys in many sessions before. I hope this dialogue will continue going and develop throughout the months we have this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lumina, for your introduction. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself to us as well?
Yeah, sure. Great to be back on another Bússola panel. Thank you, Luís, for the opportunity. I really enjoy hearing from so many other parliaments around the world facing similar problems, and this is one of the few opportunities to share those experiences and learn from each other. Yeah, my name's Steve Dwyer. I've worked in the U.S. Congress for 22 years now. 20 of those years, I was actually working for one member who was in leadership in the U.S. House. But he stepped down from leadership about a year and a half ago, and since then I've been working for the institution of the House, so in a non-political position as innovation director for the chief administrative officer, which is the largest of the institutional support office for the U.S. Congress. And so in my role as innovation director, I have been tasked over the past year and a half with doing a whole lot of work in the AI space. We are, doing lots of testing and experimenting and looking at things like governance, of course, first. But also more exciting for me is actually just getting our hands on the different tools and innovating and iterating. And it's been fun and exciting and plenty more to come, and can't wait to hear more from all of your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for your introduction. Great to have all of you back here in one of our panels. I have designed a format for our discussions today, which is I'll yield the floor to each one of you for an opening considerations with around 10 minutes. You can share your screen if you wish to do so. If not, we'll be glad to hear your thoughts. After each one of you have these 10 minutes, I have prepared a few questions for you. Time permitting, we are going to open up questions from colleagues in the audience as well. And for the opening presentation or the opening considerations, we would like to hear from you about the potential usage of artificial intelligence tools in parliamentary offices for managing the constituent relations in their parliament, or in case of NovaWorks, that I will invite to start with parliament that they have been working with. Jonathan, would you like to start with your opening considerations, maybe sharing a little bit on your recent endeavors on generative AI as well? So please feel free to,
definitely.
to use the floor.
Yeah, actually, we're very excited. We've actually just released our first live version of our generative AI systems for parliaments as well. So based on real data as well. So it's quite an interesting journey to say the least. And for example, one of the customers who are just actually starting to use it literally in this week, they've loaded up data back to literally the 1830s. And one of the things we're sort of always considering when we're actually training these sort of types of models, etc., or even like using that sort of type of data, is to really think about how old ways of thinking, and we'll say it in that particular way, can actually potentially bias new ways of thinking. So when you're typing in certain questions, as an example, into a generative AI approach, you may not want it to generate a policy which is based on, say, the way you thought in the 1800s versus the 1900s, or the 2000s, as an example. So what we've been seeing is a lot of movement, specifically from a citizen point of view, around summarization. So actually the ability to summarize documents now. So, and feeding that back in. So for example, you may have a government response. So when a citizen is actually then looking at a government response, which may be 30 pages long, have 10, 20 different recommendations, which they are going to only adopt half of those as an example, you can actually use generative AI to actually say, well, how many government responses or how many government recommendations did they actually adopt? And also, you can actually even ask it for trends, and you can actually ask it for analysis as well. So, for example, within the last Parliament, how many government recommendations were actually implemented, as an example, if we have that information. So if that information was tabled, or if that information was in that sort of AI search index, then you could actually surface a lot of that information. So we're seeing a lot of real good, interesting movement happening with the citizen engagement side of things from a natural language point of view. So asking more free form text, which again can actually increase the visibility, but also increase the engagement with citizens as well, because everyone understands the parliamentary language sometimes when they're generating a report or generating legal legislation, etc., can be very legalesque. So it can be very complicated to actually understand, as an example. So we're seeing that sort of a lot of movement around the natural language interaction with those sort of complex legal documents, but also what we're also finding is also the ability for parliaments now to generate a more simplified version of that document as well in a more meaningful way. So it can be targeted to the youth, or it could be targeted to other demographics, as an example. So it's really about, I think, extending the reach for the citizens' engagements is really quite a powerful movement, is what we're really finding at the moment. And there's been a lot of discussions with parliaments and legislative bodies around this particular topic as well. And I know that we like to talk about, well, what can we do for the back office staff or the members, etc. But I think it's also that adjunct in terms of, well, if you've got that type of technology on your data sets already, then it's actually quite an easy leap to then start to publish that in a meaningful way from a citizen engagement point of view as well. The other sort of area which we have been focusing a lot on, and the way which we're sort of tackling the citizen engagement side of things as well, is really about having it grouped per, say, topical area. So we might have a grouping for tabling of papers, or we might have a grouping for transcription or Hansard or the record, whichever terminology you're sort of more familiar with. And having that sort of context, but then having that sort of, you know, understanding that you're searching discrete areas of a business as well. So you can start off with AI technology in terms of just with the tabling of papers or the government responses or other areas along those lines, and then sort of start to target that from a publishing perspective and engagement with citizens as well. And on the flip side, what we're also finding is then when citizens are actually engaging with Parliament, say, for example, with petitions or, you know, submissions for particular legislation or along those lines, we're also finding a lot of benefit on the back-end staff as well. So that might be, for example, identification of duplicate submissions, identification of, you know, harassment or, you know, inappropriate language as an example. So using text moderation, using other sort of types of technology to say, well, you know, does this actually fit the rules and the regulations, so, you know, of the actual Parliament as well. So there's a lot of, I think, benefits on both the publishing of information to citizens as well as the consumption of information from citizens is what we're actually then finding as well. And what we have found is that when we start to actually interact with your data in a more natural way, we're finding a lot more targeted results, or a lot more information which people are able to find in meaningful ways as well. So as an example, I know in Australia, we have issues with what they call hospital ramping. And that means that, you know, when people are actually going to hospital in an ambulance, they may have to wait a long time before they actually get into the emergency department, as an example. So they're stuck in an ambulance. And that's quite a hot topic in Australia at the moment. And you can actually say, for example, we have Hansard back to, say, 1972 loaded into our AI model. And it's really quite interesting. You can actually then start to analyze and actually say, well, actually, what is the trend of this particular government, or what is the actual trend of this government on this particular topic, as an example, and have they actually made an meaningful impact? And as long as, you know, the data is in there, and, you know, again, what somebody may say on the floor of Parliament may not be, I'll say this carefully, but not 100% correct, and it may be inflated or deflated depending on if it's an opposition person or a government person, etc. You have to understand that, you know, obviously that data can obviously be misinterpreted as well. So it's tuning it in a certain way where you can actually work out what the actual truthful outcomes are, which is what we're finding a very empowering element to a lot of its use case with dealing with data as well. So I think, you know, that sort of is my sort of general, you know, 8-minute introduction. I think I've gone for about 8 minutes or so, but I'm sure, Louis, you'll keep the time limit honest on me.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the insightful opening considerations. I think it provides us the IT background for us to build upon during the panel. Cristiano, would you like to share your thoughts on this? I know you have considered this topic for a long time, so feel free to share your thoughts also for the time, 8 to 10 minutes.
Sure. I must say today I'm not in my best. I'm in the middle of a flu, so my brain's not in his best, but I do my best to at least to talk about a very interesting issue. As Jonathan said, there are many limited ways to use artificial intelligence to make the government, the parliament be better understood, because there's a lot of information, a lot of confusion, and the citizens are very confused about this complexity and this immense amount of data produced by the government, by the parliament. So one way I see is helping citizens to understand and to see what's going on in Parliament. So I'm going to talk about in a Parliament perspective, an institutional parliamentary perspective. So this is one way. Another way is how can we use, for example, artificial intelligence-based chatbot to communicate better to citizens what's going on in the Parliament. And in this regard, that's my focus here. I see 2 ways. One way is the Parliament by itself doing this. And there are some experiments going on. Even the Brazilian House is starting up doing this, developing a project to have in the future at social media messages, social media based on message exchange like WhatsApp, Telegram, virtual assistant, parliamentary virtual assistant that can provide any kind of information citizens want to know about what's going on in Parliament. So that's one wonderful way. And I believe in the future, we can have this in all the parliaments all over. It can be basically standard service, I believe. The other way, that's where I am now. That's where I was actually a few years ago, when we did this experiment in the Hacker Lab in 2018, 2019, as how the congressman individually, by himself or by herself, can using artificial intelligence chatbot to interact with citizens, to respond to the immense diverse of questions that citizens have for his congressman. Right? Typically, what's going to be our agenda in this week? Tell me about your bills. In Brazilian system, we have a very open system. The congressman can propose in limited amount of bills. What's your opinion about pension reform? What's your opinion about abortion? What's your opinion about these items of this week agenda? So there are many questions that citizens use using many channels, like the old-fashioned channels, like going face to face to the congressman office on their constituents, for example. It's an old school method that keeps working very well. Using phones, using the more digital but still old-fashioned systems as emails, for example, and now using the most, I would say, most interactive way by social media. So there are growing channels of interaction between citizens and parliament and the congressman. So how to manage this is very complex, very costly. And the congressman, the Brazilian congressman in this moment, they are creating communication staff with 2, 3, 4 guys um, working in how to organize and how to respond to these diverse channels, right? With a lot of failures, with enormous diversity in terms of how to organize the office. So the idea we had at the Hacker Lab is an innovation lab that we created here in the Brazilian House in 2013. And in 2018-19, we took this problem, how to manage this immense amount of interactions in a typical MEP office. Can we coordinate all these demands, these questions to one virtual assistant? And this guy is going to be in charge to organize and to respond more quickly and more accurate, at least the most basic questions. As we know, when we work with questions for public, we know about 78%. There are research that show this. And 78% more or less are very basic, typical standard questions. How's going to vote in the tax reform in this week, for example? They're very simple. There are like 10 to 20%. The questions are very more sophisticated. They demand more details and whatever. So what we did is using and having, please, Luís, help me with the time, right? Because my brain's not very summarized. My potential to summarize is less than normal today.
You still have 5 minutes, no worries.
Okay, so it's good time. So what we did is we went to 2 or 3 congressman offices who we have a kind of partnership. They accepted to participate in these prototypes, in this experiment. They gave us their database of typical questions and typical answers for a period of time, for 2 weeks, for example, coming from different channels, from emails, from phones, from whatever. So we create a very simple AI chatbot, not generative one. That time was like Dialogflow, this more rudimentary, very supervised. Of course, we had a lot of concerns about to supervise this very well. And then we create this chatbot as would be like a congressman virtual assistant. And we experiment this not to citizens, because our focus in this experiment was how the congressmen and their staff would feel using it. Our focus in that moment wouldn't to be how citizens would feel. That would be the next step. We didn't actually, because we stopped this experiment only this part, because our main concern are how it's going to be a nice tool to be used by the congressman's office. And the result was great, was very positive in this regard. Some of the congressmen, we did some demonstrations. We put like 10 people in the Hacker Lab room to use it, and we recorded. Somehow we registered their reactions. People were very interested in see how the responses came very quickly. So you don't need to wait for 2 or 3 days to have it answered by email, for example, or a more, would say, a wholesale declaration in Instagram after in the end of week, as some congressman does. So they have a very quick and simple answers from their questions. So that was good. Some congressmen, they felt it's very problematic. It's kind of tricky, and it's challenging, but they liked it a lot because it helps, they understand, it helps to manage this kind of quick interaction. So then can use, so the idea, and it was kind of successful in this regard, the idea is, can we use this effort of staff from their congressmen as well, responding to 78% of the demands using automated system as AI, yes, and then you can be free, more time and energy to respond personally to the rest of 20%. So the result was okay. I'll stay by here, but I want to share, and I'm gonna do right now in the chat, an article that I wrote showing the challenges of doing this. Of course, we found out many challenges. There are technological challenges, there's the governance challenge, there's the ethics and transparency challenge, there is the capacity building challenge, the human resources challenge. And that experiment took in 2018-19 showed us, you know, the great work we have to put this working very well in a trustable way in large scale for something very useful for a congressman office in the near future. So I'm gonna share this chatbot just now, this article right now here in the chat. I stay here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Cristiano, for sharing so much with us, dating back from the innovation lab with the lab hacker here in Brazil. Cristiano is one of the fathers, if not the father, of innovation here in the Chamber of Deputies in Brazil, when innovation was not such an interesting word for many colleagues. So thank you so much, Cristiano, for sharing this with us. Steve, would you like to share your thoughts as well, or your opening considerations around this topic? Also, the time between 8 and 10 minutes.
Sure. First, just jump off some of the good things that Jonathan and Cristiano have already said. You know, like Jonathan, like we really think about it of all the information coming in from the constituents and all the information going out. And so we are certainly experimenting quite a bit with that. I'll start with the coming in. Again, it's the sorting and the batching and the deduping. You know, that's a lot of manual work that every member office does and spends many, many hours every day doing that. A lot of that is very effective using LLM technology. That's sort of the organizing all the data coming in. Now, the going out is also probably even more exciting for many offices, you know, primarily in the first draft situation. So like our staffers, so one of the first things we did almost a year ago in the US House is we raced through the governance piece just to try to allow for experimentation with just ChatGPT, just because that's what we could see in the network scans. That's what everyone was experimenting with anyways. So we wanted to, you know, make it official a little bit and at least put some guardrails and at least be able to talk with all our staffers and learn how they're using it. And so we got you know, ChatGPT Plus because it's a little more secure, and then we bought a bunch of those licenses because they're not expensive. And we actually said, hey, we'll even give you a free license as long as you tell us how you're using it. And we, you know, so we learned from all of our staffers and our members of Congress that, you know, some members personally were using it very regularly. The number one use case they reported using all the time, of course, is just the first draft of whatever they were doing. The first draft of a tweet or a social media post or a long speech, you know, or everything in between, a memo. And so, you know, it was pretty good at that just with normal ChatGPT, you know. But then what they quickly learned is the more information you provide, the more context you give it, the better the results. So what they quickly did with, you know, at the time last summer, There wasn't even the more advanced MyGPTs or whatever, where you can upload all your documents and everything. So instead, they would just cut and paste. They'd say, write me a new speech like these 10 other speeches. And they'd sit there and go, copy, paste all the time. But it gave a much better speech when it just had that context of like actual examples of speeches that the member of Congress had already written and said in their voice and their style. And so those are things, voice and style and common formats. Those are things that LLMs do really good. And they're not perfect. We always say it's just first draft. It's not the final draft, you know. But it still saves a whole lot of time. You know, coming up with that first draft is, you know, there's writer's block. It's often difficult, but it's a lot easier and faster when you have much of it already made and you just got to make some edits. So that first draft was a big one of that's the information that then will go out. And then, you know, Cristiano, great comments on the chatbot example, and very impressive that you were working on that even before the LLMs blew on the scene, you know, using older AI technologies, but still the same idea, but probably way more powerful now. And so we have a couple offices that are experimenting with that same idea. And just like you said, our offices are very afraid to give it to the public, because especially now with LLMs, I mean, it might hallucinate, it might be wrong. Just tell the public that they voted one way when they voted a different way, and that could be a political problem. But just like you said, Cristiano, that we found it's actually very useful just internally in an office, because you know, if a member's been in Congress for, you know, 10 years, they have a huge history of all their votes and all their letters and all their, and it's really hard for any, you know, most of the people receiving those incoming communications. And I like your point on, there's so many more communications, you know, all the different social networks, all the different ways that we get contacted. Well, we're asking like interns or junior staffs, you know, people that have only been there less than a year. We're asking them to be able to respond, but they don't know the 10 years of complicated positions and members. So again, we're testing just internally because hopefully our interns and junior staff will be able to notice when it's completely wrong or hallucinating. But you're right, for 70–80% of the time, it seems to do very well. So we've built some very basic customer chatbots that were being used by staff, not by the public. So very similar to what Cristiano's done. I'm looking forward to reading your article, because I'm sure we've run into similar problems. Some of the problems that we have run into is just like good data. And that's what so much of the, you know, an LLM is only as good as the data that you're customizing. And that's the example of the 10 former speeches. It really should have access to all the members' speeches. You know, then it'll make a really good speech, new one, novel. But how to get that good access? And one thing we keep running into is the data is not clean, is not organized, is not formatted. And you know, one thing LLMs can do is, like, if you give it a messy spreadsheet, it can sort of find some order, and it can sort of, but if you give it, you know, a whole bunch of documents that aren't well labeled and everything, it can be a mess, and then those documents aren't as useful. So for example, on the customer service bot, you know, one of our offices had very good instructions for all of their interns. Okay, if someone calls, they had big trees where if they call and they ask about this, you know, go there, and if they ask about this, go there, and then talk to this person, and then and so for that, it was pretty easy for us to code that into the bot, to give some structure to the bot, because you can't just have it talking to, you know, general ChatGPT or whatever the other ones are, because then it would be too generalized. So this is the things that we're working with. We're working on, you know, trying to find more and more ways to get more and more data into these systems so that we can better specialize them to our needs rather than the generalized. And we're running into challenges with that. Another thing we're really working on is trying to find secure LLM technology. Like, our members are very scared and worried about, just using ChatGPT as an example, but the consumer versions of these, because they don't think that they are secure for, the important stuff is more secure, and they don't want the public knowing about it, and they don't want it being released on the internet in any way. And so that's something we're working on. We're working on different models. Should we build our own model? Should we have something middle ground where we do a lot of the customizations ourselves and the front end on ourselves, but then it's still just using the base models? We've been playing around with like AWS Bedrock because it's got all the different models available. So these are the things we've been working on here in the house as we try to enable more AI. I think I've talked long enough, Luis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for your considerations. Cristiano, it seems your article came just to us, but if you like, please send me on WhatsApp and I can send it here.
I don't recognize to I'm targeting to, so it seems I'm blocked to send to the other.
Really?
People,
okay. But yeah, please send it to me. I'll figure it out. But thank you so much, Steve, for your considerations on this. It's very interesting to learn on the possible usages that both members of Congress and also staff in the U.S. House are using all of these different solutions, be them ChatGPT, Gemini, or many other LLMs. And yeah, it provides us a very good insight on how the members of Congress are actually using, because sometimes we assume possible services that are being used for one particular reason. And in that case, it's very interesting that you have mapped the way they are actually using on their daily operations. So thank you so much for that. Lumina, I'd like to yield the floor to you between 8 to 10 minutes as well, so we can hear your considerations, your opening considerations about this topic. So please feel free to use the floor.
Hi, thank you. It was a very interesting perspective from all of our previous speakers. Especially, I agree that we need to use this AI, integrate AI to help public understand complex legal languages and parliamentary business process that everyone could accept and engage with. But I just want to add a few things and also a few projects that we are doing in the Indonesian Parliament. So the first thing is one of the challenges that we face when we're talking about citizen engagement and public participation in the Parliament is that there are so many channels and so many services of engagement and participation. There's parliamentary education, there's also complaint, there's also constituent relation with MPs, and as well as other even budgeting, as well as legislation matters and oversight matters. Because in Indonesia, we have a lot of a broad spectrum of complaints, whether it's very simple problems from the road accidents or a road or infrastructure oversight, all of that. They usually turn to the Parliament to complain and to give their aspiration. So sometimes the public tend to think that the Parliament is the solution to all of the problems that they have in the society, and as well what the government is doing in their region. So it becomes very entangled and very complicated process for public participation in Parliament. And we as the staff and also the secretariat who's working in the for the public and our MPs, sometimes we're very it's very challenging to create what type of models that we need for certain groups or certain services for public participation. That's why all of the services are very scattered. Each MPs have their own complaint system, and I'm sure you guys who works in the Parliament might be aware. And there's also commission proceedings that have their own public participation channel. There's a channel specifically for parliamentary education, and there's even like for job and recruitments, there is also a very dynamic engagement activities there, requesting for more parliamentary involvement in the job sector. So what we're planning to do is for this AI integration is that we're planning to have more piloting projects in public engagement and participation. I think I've mentioned in the previous session last year that this AI integration will be mostly heavily in public participation this year. And since we are in a very sensitive topic of transition of the new parliament this year, this might become a big opportunity for us to change and to support more investments and budgets and projects that can integrate new technologies to our old business process. So I would like to describe so basically we have like 5 ambitious public participation projects in the parliament, which is mostly deploying a virtual assistant and chat box to these units to help them conduct a more effective and complete and comprehensive business process. The first is for our, as I said before, the education parliament, which is in our PR department. So our PR department have two deployments for virtual assistant chat box. The first is for education parliament, and the second is for the public disclosure services. So these types of projects that we have, as Cristiano and Steven said, really rely on a better, like a more complete database, and that's something that's we're still struggling to until today, because there are very many silos across the units in our parliaments, and it has been hindering a lot of progress of data integrations and data openness in our institution. So what happened is we want to build a better foundation for data security and for data clearance and for data completions, where there are so many data still disconnected. And the second is also we want to make a better services in each commission. So in Indonesia, we have 11 main commissions that work on specific sectors, whether it's economy, technology, security, and ICT. So all of the parliamentary activities are concentrated in those commissions, and we want to have a more responsive responsive service from this commission when dealing with legislation and when dealing with budget oversight, because a lot of the projects and a lot of the people will usually ask and will usually engage on commission issue. So we're hopeful to deploy those chatbox AI to the commission. And the third is the legislative drafting sectors. This is mostly for our legal analysts to help them find a better searching mechanism and references. Since our database are very complete, but they're sometimes scattered, and a lot of the tools that we have are not practical enough for our legal analysts to help formulate better legislations and better and better process for drafting legislation. And our fourth is one of our ambitious one is for the complaint mechanism. This will also integrate our legal analytical tools from the previous legal analyst drafter. So we want to have a more a faster way for the public to engage on basic information, so basic information requests. For example, if they want to request some oversight for certain MPs or in certain issues, they can request it via checkbox in this complaint mechanism. And we also have adapted a lot of language models, and we have trained those AIs in many language. We have tried it in Indonesian and also slang Indonesian, and also in because Indonesia has a lot of accents and a lot of regional languages. We have trained in popular legal languages that we hopefully the public can engage, because most of the Indonesian public may not know formal or legal language, what they are. They have like for one terms, the public might understand with a different set of categories. So we're trying to train those AI models, and it's currently like our ICT department is currently experimenting with now with using slang and popular languages, so the public can be more engaged with that. And I guess this is a very sensitive issue, since a lot of parliaments might be one of the most one of the most untrustworthy institution in countries, and we want to use this AI model to generate more trust also, and generate more engagement with the public. And I think that it's important also to educate, as what Stephen said and Cristiano said. We need to educate the public on these types of transition, because if the public don't understand, they might not accept it. And the second thing is what is sensitive in the public participation aspect is that sometimes human present is more important than technological side. So that was what I was debating with Luís yesterday, because in Indonesia the public really wants to see more human, like the more humanity side of the parliament. And sometimes with this AI transition, they might degrade this kind of human process in the parliament. So in this debate, I just want to hear from all of you guys, how could we help the public to understand and educate them, because this is a very passionate project that we are doing in the parliament. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lumina, for your considerations, for sharing the incredible work that you have been doing in Indonesia on researching how to integrate artificial intelligence in your procedures, trying to make the House of Representatives even more open for the citizens. I have prepared 2 questions for the panel. One of them more on the technical side, one of them closer to what Lumina just brought to us on how can we keep this human element in parliaments. Let me start with the technical question. I'll do this alphabetically, asking Cristiano to start. Cristiano, as many of you discussed, Steve brought this topic, you brought this topic, Jonathan as well, Lumina also mentioned this. It's about data. It's all about data. The solution is as good as the data you provided. Sometimes colleagues might think that the LLM or ChatGPT, which is the most popular one, is a silver bullet that will resolve all the problems that Parliament have. My question goes in this direction. So how can the usage of generative AI tools be implemented in a seamlessly interoperate with existing legislative systems and databases, allowing for efficient access to relevant information and streamlining constituent inquiries related to, let's say, specific legislation, specific speeches, or the parliamentary process in general. So how can we use these LLMs integrated with the database from the parliaments to provide a better experience, both for the parliamentary offices that are the users of the solutions in this case, but also to citizens that will receive this information?
It's a really good questions. I see two challenges. One is how the congressmen manage their individual database about the things they need to speak with their constituents, the way they think about the issues, their agenda, and all this stuff. So it's more easily manageable. I would say, depend, of course, how organized the offices are. That's one thing. The another thing, it's more where you focusing on these questions. How can we connect with many other information that are created, the content that somehow are created by the parliaments, and to respond in a very simple way to the congressman, something that Jonathan is doing well, you know, transforming the complexity of the lawmaking system, the decision-taking system, in something simple to be understood by citizens. And as Lumina said, there are a lot of it's a big challenge in integrating and preparing the database. As you said, Luís, garbage in, garbage out. If we can have the best generative tool, the best generative AI technology, but if we don't have a good data, so we cannot trust and deliver this to citizens. And I was reading, preparing to this, Ben, I was reading article from a brilliant researcher we have here called Mariana Prentit. She's focused on documentation and legislative documentation and information. And she found out we have 14 types of database of information created by the parliament. Things like meeting, minutes, votes, legislative documents like bills, amendments, proposals in general, committee reports, sessions transcripts, historical archives, technical studies that are created by the consultancy, by the staff in general. Legislation, because the bills must be integrated with legislation, bills alter legislation, videos and audios produced by the congressmen, which are very important content today because they are using this in social media. Some of them are much more worried about the video they are doing at the session, at the plenary session, for example, than the other things. Because as you know, today the mandates are the communication issue is very important, right? And news, we have a news agency here, institution news agencies, who create a primary source of information that be used for many ages all over the Brazil and the world, what's going on here. So, and more. And every issue of this has many database which are not really integrated. We are doing this. This has been a long time project here. I mean, I think Luís is aware of it. And a lot of people working and integrating, as Lumina said, integrating the database, solving the inaccuracy problems. There are a lot of inaccuracy because there's a part of the data produced by the plenary session staff, and then a part of the data produced by the committee's staff, for example, and there are some inaccuracies. So I see basically 3 challenges in this issue. Technological challenge, maybe there's the easiest way, is the thing. We think we have technology already, right, to deal with this. The infrastructure of database, that's what I'm talking about here, how to organize and solving problems in accuracy and integrate this database. And then we have the third challenge is how to communicate this complexity. And there is a communication layer, which is not easy. It will take a lot of time to translate all this complexity. And the Brazilian law-making system is very complex. There are many possible, it's very open, many possible ways to do, to a bill going through, to explain this in a very simple way to citizens in general. So it's good to have an assistant, just to finalize, it's good to have an system where we produce a lot of this database, and this database are available in open source and open data format as we have here in Brazil. That's good, but it's a lot of complexity. It's not easy to deal with this complexity and to make that simple to citizens.
Thank you so much, Cristiano, for your considerations on this topic. Jonathan, would you like to share your thoughts on this question as well?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to Cristiano's comments as well. I think the data complexity is an interesting problem. So, for example, one of the ways which we are looking at tackling some of these issues is that we actually load up is part of the actual model itself, the standing orders and the sessional orders and the rules of a house as part of that actual data model. And what we end up doing is that we then refer to those types of rules when we then have to look at making decisions around certain of those sort of generative AI topics as well. So, so loading up your sort of rules and your sort of areas that are really, you know, have to be enforced as well, also then, you know, help generate trust and help generate that sort of level of transparency as well, to know that you do have some sort of boundary in place to actually make that work. So I think when we are looking at you know, accessing all those sort of information and also, you know, the data sets as well, I think consolidation of data sets is really important. So one of the inherent issues that we find with a lot of different sort of parliaments and congresses, etc., is that they do have 20, 30 different data sources which they are continually updating, monitoring, managing. It might be done by different parts of a business and a whole range of other things. So the centralization of data, I think, is really critical to really achieving really good again, if your data is not very good, it won't really matter, but it's really about having a central source of truth. Really does become important when tackling conversations around artificial intelligence. It was really interesting. I was reading an article, I think it was published probably about a week or two ago around Bloomberg. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this one, where they invested about $10 million training their GPT-3.5 model. And they then decided to try out the latest GPT-4 8K model. And they found that actually the financial analysis was actually performant in the 4K model without any training. Still using their data, but without any actual additional training as well. So, you know, it's interesting to understand, you know, you have your data elements, you have your model, and then trying to work out actually how do we actually then integrate all this together in a cohesive story is actually, you know, it can be quite complex, but at the same token, it's a matter of, I think, working through that process, working through, you know, what does that data actually look like? And it's interesting when we've worked on projects in the past where we're doing data migration from one data source to a centralized data source, etc., we always find data inconsistencies. Like, I think, like, I can never say we've never, we've always found it, you know, and a date might be wrong, or this might, you know, a reference might be wrong, or a old reference might be in there as an example, because what we find is that with historical parliamentary data is that once it's created, we usually don't revisit it unless we have to. And that is purely because of the nature of parliamentary business, where we're now moving on to the next thing and the next job and the next bit of legislation and the next, you know, area, etc. So any mistakes that, you know, have been potentially made are really hard to identify unless somebody actually is manually looking at it and verifying it as well. So, you know, it's I think trying to make sure that whatever data you're actually then loading into these types of AI models, you know, to help with legislation, you know, generation, or to help with queries, to help with analysis, etc., is actually meaningful to the end user. We're finding a lot of interest, for example, you know, with members of Parliament using it in their day-to-day operations. And I love the analogy around loading up 10 speeches by you know, Stephen, as an example, you know, because you want to give it as much context as you can. And, but that context has to also be correct. And does it have to then be tailored for a individual or a group of individuals who are then accessing that content for that specific task as well? So coming back down to my original sort of comment to say, we tend to focus around generative AI on the types of functions that they're actually trying to perform. So we don't necessarily have one, big generative AI system, but what we end up doing is that we segment it into those functional areas to make it more meaningful for the content which is trying to either be referenced or used as an example as well. One of the other things I do think we should probably tackle is from Lumina, your sort of comment around the multi-language models as well. And the interesting part about it is that a lot of the sort of what I call common AI models are very much English based. And so there is a complexity when we have to deal with different dialects. We have to deal with those sort of different areas to really make it, engaging from a different sort of country and citizens, but also multiculturalism as well. So, making it, in Australia, we have so many different nationalities here, and, not everyone speaks English as a first language, as an example. So the ability to use AI to, either translate or to have that sort of model, in a meaningful way with different languages, I think is another area which I think should be looked at, in a bit more intensity as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your considerations on this topic. Lumina, would you like to share your thoughts as well?
I would like to add what Jonathan said about the single source of truth, since that's something that we are very struggling in Indonesian parliament. So, for example, like in Indonesia, the data for poverty, we have 3 to 5 sets of data that sets the percentage of poverty in Indonesia, and they're all very different from the government and the parliament. So, because how institution in Indonesia work, they're very ego-sectoral, they're very political, and with many interests, they sometimes approach this type of data and issue very differently. So that's why our healthcare have their own definition of poverty, and our social department have their own definition of poverty. The political party have their own definition of poverty. So that's why the data comes very differently and very very variously, and it's difficult to define that sort of like a single source of truth, which one is very accurate. And even in the parliament, each political party may have their own sets of data, and they sometimes don't want to share those to our parliament, to our team, and it becomes very very clouded towards the system and also the people, and we've faced many errors during proceedings and during public relation engagements. Sometimes when we want to set some kind of statement and some kind of legislation, there are always going to be revision and incorrect data inside of those information, and that's why it's very difficult for us to process this. But our team is trying to work more with the government and work with more institutions and parliamentary and political parties as well, to see to standardize the data and also to integrate data better than before. And to add on this point, is like I want to highlight on specific issues on the human relation side of things, how to integrate this AI, since a lot of our staffs may not have the incentive to use new technologies inside the parliament, and I think you guys will experience that or already experience as well. So in the human resources aspect, our parliament are still very struggling in digital literacy and technology, and a lot of this issue comes from the age gap for the public officials and the people who are MPs. We still have a very high parliament MPs who are in the above 60 category. So it's very difficult for us to introduce them to new models and new technologies and emerging issue with this. So what we did is we try to focus on the people who wants to who are excited to share this this technology, and we are incentivizing them with many projects and awards for the staffs that want to experiment with new models, and even they are now exploring ChatGPT for parliaments. So they want to learn more of many more applications of that integrate AIs. And as well as they want to integrate it in the new model. And what we did is we do an intensive training for 3 months for this piloting project that we mentioned before. And we also help them, have the sense of achievement of in trying to change this mindset in the parliament. So we've done a lot of in the human resources aspect, just to build that foundation of transition. And the third thing is that we are also trying to develop more relations and more researches towards the public and towards the constituents. So our researchers have been deployed to many regions in Indonesia and to survey their language models, to survey their interactions, and we want them to be able to gain a sense of awareness of how to engage with the public and in a more grounded aspect. So hopefully with this we can create a more practical practical services for the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lumina, for your considerations. Steve, do you have any thoughts on these? Would you like to share your ideas?
Sure, I like going last because I can sort of jump on different things you all have already said. I think of it like many layers of an onion, where the outside layer is like the general LLM, like the ChatGPT, which I think of it also as sort of a brain, and that brain is the entire internet, essentially. Like that's what it's trained on, right? It's just general knowledge from the entire internet. But then, as for our purposes within a parliament, you keep going down, and there's still so many more layers. There's one that maybe is the entire government, which is still very big, very broad, very complex. You're trying to have all that data available and accurate to something like a chatbot, but also other application uses is still so difficult, and it's something we were working on way before AI burst on the scene recently. Before it was just like open data. It was just trying to be transparent and good government. And that is for the entire government. But then also one more layer down the onion is like just the parliament or the Congress. And they have their own special knowledge. And so I know, only because I've been here for 20 years, that, we've been working on this for 20 years. I mean, I remember 20 years ago, I remember being shocked that our legislative systems were essentially closed. There was a website and you could sort of access them, but like there was no APIs, no bulk access, no, if somebody wanted to make an app about congressional data, no way. It was all a dark black box. You'd have to screen scrape, and they'd block the screen scrapers. It was an awful mess. And myself and many others in the U.S., said that this is wrong. Like, we think it should be open, and I know that's happened all around the world over the past 20, 30 years. But we're not complete. So, in the United States, our Library of Congress is our main clearinghouse of all the legislative information for Congress, all the bills and amendments and members and committee actions and et cetera. And that is, of course, very, as Cristiano was saying, like that's very complex data that needs to be released to the public. And so we have it. And so I think 10 years ago, we started doing bulk releases where we would just every night just dump all that data, like so that anyone could use it. Only like, I think 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, did we finally have our first API. It's called the Congress.gov API. That's even more useful for a developer because they can just say, hey, give me information on this bill, boom, and they get the, all the members that have signed on to the bill, and they get the summary of the bill, and they get the text of the bill and everything. But it turns out with AI, the old bulk data is more useful than the API because the AI system wants all of it. It doesn't want to ping an API. So it's kind of funny that luckily we still have the bulk data, even though more people use the API, the bulk data is still there. So that still gets dumped out every night. But that's an example of the parliament level. And then you get lower, like Lumina was talking about the parties, like within each, they have their own data. Some of it's public, some of it's private, within that party that they want to keep it inside that party. And so in my old job, when I worked for a party leader, I'd spent a lot of time on keeping all of our private information that we only wanted people in our party to see. And then you go lower, there's every committee has their own, layer, and then every office. And so like Cristiano talked about that too, where a lot of times that's just a network share, a Dropbox or a OneDrive or whatever, and it's just a ton of documents. Well, they need to be better organized in order to take advantage of an AI. What we learned early on, we took one of those large, we call them common drives, but they're just an office's documents. And we just tried throwing it in an LLM, and we thought it was just going to work. It didn't work. Like they were a mess. Like all the letters, the LLM had no idea if the letter was from the member or to the member, for example. Like we thought it could just, LLM silver bullet. We thought it was just going to be great, but nope. And so instead, we've been working on much more targeted, like within a member office, what are the documents they produce most? Let's just work on those. So like constituent responses to the letter on, our immigration crisis. So let's just focus on the letters. And we've had a lot more success when we're more focused. And then instead of taking the entire common drive, we just take 50 good letters from the past year. And so it's back to the speech example, but they don't have to cut and paste. And so that's within the office. And then, there's even another layer of the onion. The inside of the onion is the person. And so I'm really excited when like, once, I know this is we do handle Microsoft, just for our email and everything, Office 365. Once we have like LLMs in our own stuff, like, I have 20 years of email where most of my work has been done, and all of my meetings are, all the transcripts of all the meetings and all my huge personal drive of all the files I've ever made, the PowerPoints and everything. Like, I can't wait till I have all of that clean in an LLM. I'm gonna talk to that LLM constantly, and so that's the inner part of it. But at each of these levels, you're right, data is the hard part. So we just gotta, I think it's kind of easy on that person level because Microsoft sort of already does that. For us, it's Microsoft. You could use Google. You could do. They organize and they know all the emails and they know every email is exactly from you or to you or whatever. And but when it's just more disorganized within an office, often that's harder. So I think it's going to require a lot of organization, and then it often gets harder with security too. I think when it's a person, you know that it's of course private to you, your email, but when it's a group, it's harder to control who has access to that data. So I think I've probably talked long enough, but I like to think of it, as the onion and all the layers, and every layer needs to clean up all that data and give access, and then to use LLM technology in specific ways. That's one thing Jonathan said is like, break it down into specific tasks. Like another project we're working on is for all of Congress. So this would be on the Congress level of the onion, is all of our hearings. Yesterday there were 50 committee hearings, all the committees and subcommittees, 50 different hearings going on in one day. and nobody can watch all those or even necessarily read about those. So instead, what we're doing is we have very clean transcripts for every meeting. That's a requirement in our rules. So just automatically spit all the transcripts in and get, both a maybe a 5-page summary and a 1-page summary, and how about a 1-paragraph summary? And then use those in different ways. We've got a nice website that we've been working on lately just to show all those 50 hearings that were going on yesterday and have nice like video links and everything. Well, now let's also put in the little 1-paragraph summary of each one so that, you can just at a glance see what actually happened yesterday. And that's a good use of LLM. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for the very insightful and broad possibilities on AI. And I have to say, sometimes I talk to the LLMs myself. So, but guys, we have 10 minutes to end the panel. I do have one last question for you. So if you can keep as brief as possible. And I'll be democratic, Steve. Since you were the last, now you're going to be the first. My next question is exactly what Lumina brought in her considerations. How can we keep the human element? Because when we start to use, for example, these tools on constituent relations, answering emails, messages, etc., we have the risk of the constituents disengaging and saying, "Oh, I'm not talking to a human anymore." So this is an AI-generated message. This is an AI-generated content. So how can we keep this human element on the relation between the parliamentarian, the member of Congress, the party represented in Congress, and the constituent? And secondly, inside the same messages, what strategy can be implemented to ensure that constituents still feel heard and valuable in an increased automated environment? So how can they feel that their requests are being heard, not only added to the LLM to create a personalized message? Steve, would you like to share your thoughts?
Sure. Great questions. I mean, on the first point, I think it goes back to what Cristiano was saying earlier about like 70 to 80% is just basic stuff. So those people, I think it's about separating those 70 to 80% to the 20 to 30% that actually need personal help. And you can do that a lot of ways. Like I think about it like the old automation systems, like on the phone, where you have to press 1 and 2 and you have to listen and it's painful. And as long as you have that 0, get me to a person, like, I think that's important. So I think the chatbot needs that 0, like, no, I don't want to know what your hours are and what, like, I need to talk to somebody. Like, so I think having some escape hatch to a person is important in any of these systems. But also, a lot of times if they are in that 70 to 80%, they don't necessarily want to talk to a person. They just want what they called for, that piece of information they're looking for. And so I think customer service can really be improved because it can, unlike the telephone, they don't have to listen to the long menu, hit, but no, this will work like that. This will be fast. This will be good customer service. So I think it can really improve things for most customers. But of course, for the human element, sometimes they call us with very serious problems, and for those people, we need to make sure that they can talk to somebody who cares and is a person very, very quickly. And then what your second question, sorry?
Yes, how they can feel valued and how can we keep the human element on these interactions?
Oh, yeah. To make sure they feel valued. And a lot of them that call in, they just want to say that they want the member of Congress to be for this issue or against this issue. A lot of times they're trying to influence the member of Congress by giving their opinion. And I think AI actually has potential to automate that a lot. A lot of times right now that goes into a black box, which is just the member, you tell the member, you say, oh, we got a lot of calls today that's for tax reform or against tax reform, but it never goes to the public or anything. And I think when people call, they think, oh, this person just, who cares? They don't really tally my thoughts. But I think with an AI, if it's an automated system, you could build into the system, do you want your opinion, tallied publicly, for example, or something? And you could build in a nice system. Once it's automated, you can do a lot more with the data. and which you couldn't do when it's just people answering phones or whatever. So I think that has a lot of potential.
Thank you so much, Steve. Lumina, would you like to share your thoughts on these two matters as well?
I think one of the most important aspects of public participation that AI could also serve is ensuring that response to the public. So the public basically just want to be heard, and they want some sense of that their comments and aspiration are heard. So that's why we tend to emphasize more on giving a response, whether it's like, thank you for your comments and aspiration, or yes, we will process it. So ensuring that those aspirations are processed and ensuring that we keep updating them with updates and informations, I think that will also help with the public being noticed and being heard by the Parliament. And I want to highlight more on Jonathan's points on moderation as well, because a lot of our public also tend to be very negative. They usually troll and bully the comment section or the online platforms, and it's important for the AI to help moderate and cluster those issues and also analyze those type of sentiments from the public. I think it's very important for MPs to realize and to see that sometimes what the public are saying, it's not really what's the issue inside. So our public can be very emotional and expressive, but there's some underlying issue that MPs can really see if we have better technologies and better models for that. And another thing is that again, I would like to sound out more on education for the public regarding the services and new technologies, because the public can tend to be very threatened by changes, and especially when there are many transition in the Parliament. For example, during COVID, where most MPs are mostly online, the public feels that they have reduced the accessibility from the public to the Parliament. So we need to ensure that technology will give them space, and technology will help them respond to all of their aspirations. And one other thing that I want to share in Indonesian context is that we are moving our capital to a new island. So so there has been issue ringing around the public on the accessibility of the Parliament, because later all the government and the Parliament will be in the middle of the forest, and the public cannot demonstrate. They cannot go to the Parliament more easily, like in Jakarta, for example. So I think a lot of our IT teams are trying to help MPs with AI technology, with Microsoft as well, to help to engage and to ensure there is accessibility between MPs and parliaments with the public. So that's a whole other story that we will get into in another session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lumina, for your consideration and thoughts. Jonathan, would you like to share your thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're dealing with AI and the citizens, etc., I think being open and transparent that the Parliament is in using artificial intelligence, I think is an important part of a process. So if you do have a chatbot, as an example out there, put a little disclaimer on there to say, your response may be generated by using artificial intelligence, but if you want to speak to a human, please type this, or please press 0, as sort of Stephen was sort of saying on the old phone sort of analogy, etc. So I think if you are going to use AI from a citizen engagement point of view as well, you may, like, for example, if you're generating a document to send to a citizen, and that's a draft, which still requires manual review, and I always sort of people have probably heard me say this before, AI, I always look as a supplement to your job rather than a replacement for your job. So, you know, use it to create the content, draft the content, etc., but still review it, still edit it, still, you know, update it according to what you feel is actually the best approach with it. It may give you good ideas. It may give you better ways to word a sentence, as an example, but you're still the one in control in terms of how you actually want to interact and use artificial intelligence too. And I think even if you look at the citizens nowadays, you know, if you look at, I know my son, you know, who uses Snapchat with all his school friends, etc., they have an AI, you know, sort of section in there. So, you know, the concept of using artificial intelligence and the concept of interacting with artificial intelligence is becoming a lot more prevalent. So, you know, I think it's giving people the option to say, if you want to use this really interesting tool, you could use the tool. But if you want to go, say, more down a traditional path, here is also a traditional path too. If you want to go directly to the Library of Congress, as an example, and, you know, open up a textbook and open up a book, you can do that as well. So I think, you know, for me, it's also giving citizens all the choices that we should be making sure, instead of directing them always to a specific point.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your considerations. Cristiano, would you like to share your thoughts and close this round?
Sure. I totally support what Stephen and Jonathan said. We need to open these new ways, inviting citizens to participate. It's much more seduction than something you force. And in implementing innovation public area, furthermore, in these very sensitive areas, dealing with a not very, we'll say, polite citizens, and, you know, parliaments in general, they are in the center of a lot of critics and whatever. We know that. So we need always to invite, to seduce, to make options, not to push and force anything. So, for example, if you send an email to a congressman, you can have this link for, please, if you want to a very quick response, maybe you can access this chatbot. It's the Mr. Congressman virtual assistant. Not he, it, the thing, can help you to have this answer quickly. If you don't have this answer quickly, automatically generated, you can wait in a line, and then there are a lot of people can help you, but you have to wait. So using these ways of seducing, inviting people, I think it's a good way to implement this kind of innovation. And so we need to think in a transitional stage in any kind of innovation we are implementing. This transition stage, we must, and it's very costly, maintain the old ways of having this interaction and adding this new way, putting chatbots, smart chatbots in this regard. So I believe and being transparent, always, for example, we always did in the Hacker Lab, and we kind of have this license, poetic license to use the beta version. So the projects in the Hacker Lab always were in a beta version. When you put beta version, there you reduce the citizen expectations in terms of efficiency of this. And more than that, we invite citizens to help us to make that better. And there's always a field where you can send critiques and comments. Then you transform a typical critical citizen in someone that it's a kind of collaborator. So using these strategies, transparency, inviting to participate, beta version, options, to easygoing testing this specific innovation, it's the best way I think we can implement this kind of innovation.
Thank you so much, Cristiano. You just set the topic for the next panel about behavior science on using AI in parliaments. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, we are a little bit beyond the time, but I wanted to use the floor for 30 seconds to each one of you for your final messages, any final thoughts that you might have. Very briefly, please. Cristiano, would you like to start since you already have the floor? And 30 seconds, your final message.
That was a great pleasure and very fruitful to have participate in this panel. I believe, and I'd like to talk very briefly about the future. I believe in the future, we can have these very customized chatbots where the congressman can have, for example, customized individual recorded video for every citizen based on a typical video he record, for example, for about his opinion about abortion, and the artificial intelligence can aggregate the name of citizens, for example, in their speech. And that, so we have technology already to do this, right? And I believe the best way to start with these things is working with very simple, as Jonathan said, Stephen as well, very simple project experiments, one day, one video. The congressman can invite people to test if they like this, they like that. So because it's very dangerous, and it's a typical speech of the people who doesn't like innovations in meetings, right? They said, oh, it's very complex. We must be very prepared to deal with that. There's a lot of dangers and a lot of challenges. And the way to do with this is like Jonathan is doing, and Stephen and Lumina as well. So let's go easy and make tests, invite people to participate in this regard. So that's the way I see it. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure meeting all of you. I think Stephen, we had the last time we met was in Kiev in Ukraine in an open parliament event.
It was. It's
when
heartbreaking.
Was
that was 2017 maybe or 18.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, just way before
the war. Yeah.
War. So nice to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Thanks, Luís.
Thank you so much, Cristiano. Steve, would you like to hop on with your final message in 30 seconds, please?
Sure. Yeah. Just ditto what Cristiano just said. You know, I'm an optimist, and I see you did have one question on this point about the whether or not being an optimist on these AI technologies. I think we, as people that work inside parliaments, we as technologists, we have to work with these new technologies. Like Cristiano was saying, you know, experiment with them, test with them. If we don't, we will be overrun by them, and it'll make things worse. You know, definitely with the deep fakes, you know, and with fake information, even just emails, just, you know, or you know, astroturfing, we call it, where, you know, people fake public outrage on an issue just to move an issue. And those are problems, you know, way before email existed. And there are going to be problems 10 years from now when everything's being run by AI. But we, with the interests of the institution, need to deal with these technologies, know how these technologies work, use them to the best of our ability to advance our mission of being open and communicative with the public in order to keep our institutions, you know, as democratic as possible. And so I'm still an optimist, but it does require a lot of work on all of our parts. Thank you so again for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your participation. Jonathan, you have any final thoughts or messages in 30 seconds, please?
Yeah, I think my probably message would be start small, and, you know, do it on a work out what your use cases are, and really focus your attention on those. Don't try to solve every single issue at once. I think everyone's sort of conversations here today have highlighted that, you know, especially for me as well. So I think, yeah, start small, and then focus your attention and make sure you're delivering that meaningful approach for that particular project.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your final considerations and for your participation as well. Lumina, would you like to close today's panel with your final message?
Yeah, I agree with all of you. Start small, start piloting projects and experimenting with that in Parliament. And for my personal take is that I think AI is imminent. It is something that will not go away. It's not just a fad, or it's not just a trend that's come and go, but it is something like the next level of technology that we have to start to deal with. And if Parliament, just as Stephen said, if Parliament don't start now, they will be overrun by these technologies and overrun by other stakeholders that are using this technology. And even now, our government have experimented and making more and more labs about AI, and the Parliament is still very concerned about the risk and the mitigations and all of the consequences, and maybe some of the privileges that they might lose by integrating this new technology. So that's for another story, but I think it's important for us as the supporting staff to introduce them to new technology and make them less scary, and also always educate the public, and making sure that this will not hinder their process with their MPs and the process with the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lumina. Thank you, all of you.